From the Youth Science Council, this is Good Question, a podcast about science in the UAE. I'm your host, Sara Shirbashi. Today, we are joined by AlMaha AlMuhairi. AlMaha is interested in combining technology with agriculture, and in this episode, she talks to us about some core ideas that lie at the intersection of these two fields, including indoor vertical farming, blockchain technology, and rapid prototyping. Here is our conversation. Welcome to the show, AlMaha.
Hi, nice to meet you, Sarah.
So we're going to talk about farming today, urban farming, other things like rapid prototyping. But I was thinking maybe we could start by talking about the history of farming and the origin of farming. Can you give us a little, like a kind of a brief idea about where we started this and how we started it?
I think the origins of farming was around 10,000 years ago. It's one of the relatively new age, old age technologies, I like to say. People forget the first original form of technology was actually farming. And, I think that's, it allowed us as humans to settle down, to start these great cities of the world like Paris, or even think of these giant landmarks that we know today like the pyramids of Giza. And farming enabled us as a species to go further, more than just survive in the world.
What's the mechanism
or
by which
survive
we
against
started becoming more creative because of farming?
It enabled us. Humans are always creative. So people have been creating art even before even farming. So humans by nature are creative.
Okay.
So but it facilitated other aspects of the society to evolve. So you're talking about, for example, because you can feed the blacksmith, you allow the blacksmith to be an expert in his craft, to make swords, to make utensils, to make other things flourish in society. So you gave a helping hand for people not just to think about their stomachs and their livability or survivability, but to think of beyond. So think of the future and beyond. For example, conquest in the sense for the blacksmith. So the blacksmith was making swords that fighters would fight and conquest to other lands, for example. So then again, that secures other places in the world. People have been fighting for farmlands all over the world, and still some places still today, not just for farmland, but for resources, natural resources. So you have these great cities that you know what I mean? The great cities in the world, they started thriving because of farming. So, the Incas, because they created the plateaus, they were able to create these large and vast cities. A lot of culture happened, a lot of inventing happened.
So this is quite like the innovative capacity of fire, for example.
Yes.
Have you read Noah Harari's book?
Yeah, so a lot of these ideas come from Noah Harari. He's my favorite author, actually.
Yeah, his popular book, Sapiens,
yes,
right?
Sapiens.
So Sapiens, the first one, it's interesting. In the beginning of the book, it has this very nice chronology of events in human history.
Exactly.
And it says 70,000 years ago, we had what is called the cognitive revolution for having discovered fire. And then fire, just a very sort of simplistic understanding of it, my understanding of it, is that, it allowed us to move on from eating raw food to eating cooked food, and therefore utilizing our stomachs less. And so that allowed us to use our brains more because it expanded the amount of energy that's being consumed by our stomachs. And then this eventually also led to sort of the cognitive revolution. So this is the capacity for us to be innovative and the capacity for us to produce creative outputs.
Yes.
So I guess it's similar to that. And these are sort of the environmental innovations that facilitated human development, right? So farming and fire.
They go hand in hand, because in the end of the day, they needed a way to cook the vegetables or cook their livestock, because people always think about farm as just growing vegetables, but I always say it's like the full circle. So you're talking about just also livestock and the community of the farm and the full circle, the growing, in order to, I would say, you go to farms, like modern farms today, they will have They would have chickens, even though they're just growing, their main output is vegetables. The reason they would have chickens is to fertilize the food, but then they might go into a secondary market to maybe sell chickens for consumption or for their eggs. And then, people will take these eggshells and make them into Easter eggs. So you have a whole community of just because it came out of this one farm. So
Yeah, I see.
It's
a very versatile industry.
Yeah, it's a very full circle thing, and then it comes down to the core of humans, as we talked about how ancient of a technology farming is, and at some point in time we were all farmers, or even before that hunter-gatherers. So we owe our lives to the farm, I would say. And I think when the future of farming always comes back to the past. So I mean, in my opinion, it's. I think the way forward is the way back in terms of farming. Instead of having monoculture crop farming, these industrial farms. I think it makes sense to have smaller farms in different places in the world, and just because of climate change, it mitigates the need for large amounts of pesticides, or It just has redundancy factors to it, to where, for example, if one crop fails, you have another. I don't know if you heard about the banana crisis we have now. So
is it now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I think I read about that a few years ago as a prediction in the future. We're in the future.
Yeah, we are in the future. And
so what's going on with the bananas?
So all the bananas you eat today comes from one clone banana. So it's the original banana. So they're all identical. All bananas today we eat are all identical today. So what funny thing is, one disease gonna wipe them all out. So these big conglomerates of agriculture like Chiquita or other, I would say, big banana industry companies producers. They're searching for the next banana, and that banana might have seeds. Because thousands, I would say hundreds of years ago,
I love bananas.
We had seeds. So I think the previous banana already was wiped out. So if you talk about maybe 100 years ago, that banana we used to eat was wiped out. So we're eating a second species of banana.
So has the disease already started?
Yes. And you can't grow in that. You can't grow in the same land for, I think, 30 years or something like that because of that disease.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I'm not a banana expert, but
yeah.
Again, it's because of monoculture.
Yeah.
So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see what you mean. All right, so I wanted to ask you about rapid prototyping. You do rapid prototyping at Fab Lab. So what is rapid prototyping and what's Fab Lab?
So I feel like Fab Lab has an emphasis on more like digital fabrication. But because digital fabrication comes hand in hand with rapid prototyping, digital fabrication, let's define that at first. So digital fabrication is like, today, maybe 50 years ago, if I wanted to create a product, I would make like a clay model at home and whatever, send it to like a big, large corporation to come make me a model. It's very expensive, very time consuming. I have to order like a batch, and maybe it's not the best way to manufacture something, but that's how it used to be. Whereas rapid prototyping now, because we have 3D printers, we have CNC machines, we have laser cutters, it enables us to create products on the spot or create solutions on the spot. So instead of going to a factory or manufacturing something very far away, I can create it here, and even maybe this can be the product itself. And I can iterate really fast rather than wait to the next iteration. As you can see, like today products, they get updated yearly. Before in the past, if we wanted a new phone, we had to wait like 3 or 4 years for the next iteration of a new phone. Or a specific company trying to beat its competition for the next big thing. Whereas now, people innovate like on a daily basis on the same product, just based on their experience of using the product, like product usability. So that's what I would say the gist of rapid prototyping is. Allowing you to prototype in a fast way, and it doesn't need to be like in a factory. It can be in a lab, for example, the Fab Lab. And I believe we have over
67.
No,
How many labs
yeah,
in the
we
world?
yeah,
Yeah, 67.
yeah, but then we have like micro labs, I believe.
So 1,000 laboratories in over 67 countries.
Yeah, so we have exactly, and it does grow exponentially. So it doubles in amount of fab labs around the world every year.
Yeah.
So there's a law for it. Even So we have more fab labs every year by double its size every year.
And this is belonging to the same network of
the Fab Foundation.
Yeah.
So the local Fab Lab here we have is the Fab Lab UAE. It's I believe the biggest Fab Lab in the region. It's under Hamdan Awards or Hamdan Foundation, and I'm very glad to be one of the members in Fab Lab, and proud to be in Fab Academy. And Fab Academy is basically a course that teaches you a new rapid prototyping skill every week. And then you have to create something in the end of the week. So we learn, let's say, something on Wednesday. We have to deliver that product on the next Wednesday.
Okay. So then, right. So I understand the philosophy behind this.
Yes.
I got this. But so what characterizes rapid prototyping today that we didn't have in the past? So you're saying, okay, we produce things much faster rate. We produce iterations at a much faster rate, so you don't have to wait very long between installments that are better and more improved. Okay, but like how? So why did they not just think of this earlier and then establish this kind of technology earlier in order to get this faster production? I'm sure they had drawbacks or barriers that you overcame with this technology. What are these mechanisms by which you overcame the barriers that characterized the old way we did production, like prototyping, sorry?
Yeah, I mean, one thing is, I would say the defining factor of this is the internet. So because we had the internet, I would say, I believe in the 80s, the mainstream internet, you're talking about people...
In the 80s?
Yeah. The
mainstream internet?
Yeah, mainstream.
In the 2000s?
No, I mean the mainstream version of the internet, not the... I mean, when was the rise of the internet? That's what I meant.
Okay.
So I believe it was in the 80s.
Was it? I thought it was like 2000s, early 2000s.
And in our region, yes.
Okay.
But in the US, it was in the 80s.
Okay, cool. Okay,
so imagine the same time in the 80s, the 3D printer was invented and it was under a patent. So no one was able to use this 3D printer, which is the same technology we have today, because it was under a patent. So, the internet as a power at that time enabled people from far away to, talk to each other through email, and changed the way of communication, and changed how ideas were shared, and people demanded instant ideas because of the, instantaneous nature of the internet. So, it allowed people to spread ideas even more, right? So, again, let's go back to the story of the 3D printer. It was made by a specific company in the 80s, and it was patented. So no one was able to use 3D printing or its technology till 20 years later, 2014. 20 years later, 2014, the patent expired. So that's how we got the rise of 3D printers.
Okay.
In 2014, whereas this technology was there. Imagine when we had the pinnacle of the height of the internet in the 80s, when it first started, everyone using it for free. May I add that, and allowed so many people to do so many things, do search engines, do social networks, do all of these technologies behind this one concept of the internet. And if we had the same time the 3D printer, we would have this rapid prototyping age way back then. But because of a patent law and...
But what's the connection between the internet and rapid prototyping?
As I said, it broke
the
down...
proliferation of ideas?
It broke down the barrier of I would say, the middle person. So now you don't need to go to a factory to make something.
Okay.
You can just go to a lab, or you can go to any 3D printer.
So you're saying
to
like
make
the
something.
instructions come from the internet.
Yes.
And then the knowledge comes from the internet,
Yes.
and the application is within the 3D printer, whereby you can apply the prototyping.
Yes.
But the internet facilitates that by providing the knowledge.
Yeah, so I mean,
Okay.
my course that we learned, and it's our main instructor, he is like a person we saw through the internet. So we have a video conference, and you're talking about all the Fab Academy participants of that year. We're all on a video conference, so we all learn the same thing, the same skill through the internet, and then we have to apply it in real life. So again, digital learning. So I think
I see. I get
you know what I mean? I mean, I learned agriculture and farming mainly through the internet, through YouTube videos, through reading online resources, through meeting people online and understanding how they do things, and rarely from actual physical people that I see in real life.
Yeah.
You know, online mentorship is a big thing as well.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about how they're connected, I think without the internet, rapid prototyping wouldn't be the same. That's in my opinion. You know, because all of these things are open sourced. Back then, the open source mindset didn't really exist, I would say, because of people who wanted to make their money through their products, and they didn't want to advance these products. You know what I mean? Like, if it takes so long to have a patent, and then they wouldn't change their technology or make public of this technology again, the 3D printing story, because they wanted to make their money out of it.
Yeah, I get you.
But that stopped it. The internet stopped that.
Yeah.
Because technologies are going to happen faster.
Yeah.
It's
I see your point. I get what you mean. Yeah. So let's go to this agriculture. Let's go to talk about agriculture. So you work on combining technology with agriculture. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Maybe we can start by talking about blockchain and agriculture. So how do we use blockchain to improve agriculture as a technology, blockchain as a technology? How do we use that to improve agriculture? So what are some of the key things that define this this relationship between them?
I feel that blockchain gives transparency and it gives traceability to agricultural goods today, whether it is livestock or vegetables and fruits. We have a very big problem of food fraud. So
what is that?
What is food fraud? Food fraud is, for example, you buy olive oil, extra virgin olive oil from a certain brand, and they might claim it is 100% olive oil, but at the end of the day, it is like maybe by law, they only need to put in 5% actual olive oil, or I don't know.
What's
and
the rest of it?
And the rest is what is the rest? I don't know. It can be canola or cheaper oils, I would say.
Right.
So, and then that comes down even with fish. So some people, they will get wild salmon, and it comes from, let's say, a specific country in the Southeast Asia. And actually, it turns out to be a fish that looks and tastes like salmon, but actually it is not salmon because it doesn't have the same benefits as salmon. But it still looks and tastes like it.
Right.
So how would people know the difference? Because it's filleted. How would they ever know?
Yeah.
So technically, they would never know. Or what's funny is people think, have you ever went to a sushi restaurant and had like a crab,
salad?
Not a crab salad or a crab maki?
Yeah.
Do you know that's actually not crab?
No.
It's actually imitation crab. If it's in a crab stick, crabs don't come in sticks.
What do you mean?
It's basically, let's say, a material that looks like, in your head, crab, but actually it's flavored crab. So it's not actually crab.
Okay.
It's imitation crab.
Right. So what is it actually made of?
It depends on the factory. Sometimes they make it with, I don't know, byproducts of fish, and they mash it up together like a hot dog.
Right. Thanks for that.
I mean, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Or some people, crab, I don't know if you ever had crab from a crab, but it doesn't actually look like that.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah, and people always like...
So this food fraud is pretty common?
Yeah, it's a very big problem. And okay, well, I'm just mentioning to you about fish and crab
and
But it goes back to even worse things. Like we have a very big crisis in China, I believe, with their supply of, I believe, pigs. And because they're the number one consuming country of pigs in the world, or I would say pork, not pigs, they have a very big problem there, where they have a disease similar to what we would say to, way back when mad cow disease. But I don't know the specific word for the pork industry, but it's similar for the pigs.
Yeah.
So now they have a shortage of pork in the country that mostly consumes pork in the world.
Okay, sure.
So again, when we were talking about the bananas, it's it's a big problem because now, for example...
Because when a disease attacks a common strain, it wipes out that strain.
Yes, it does. So now if anyone wants to eat pork, for example, from China, we don't know how this disease might affect humans. Or we also have a crisis now where we have stopped the imports of certain poultry from certain countries because they have, for example, a specific disease that can hurt humans, like bird flu, for example.
So is this the idea of food traceability?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So this is like tracing foodborne diseases that threaten public health.
Yes. So again, how blockchain will actually aid in that because it gives transparency to the food industry. So you know, there's some companies that will they would have like a piece of meat and they put a barcode on it, and they'll tell you when it was, when, for example, this cow was born, when was the cow processed, where did it stop on the way to get to here, which farm did it come. Yeah. So it gives you a full circle of this animal's livestock, which is also very, I would say, beautiful because you can understand where this cow came from and how it ended up being here. And, you know, if you ever heard of these, like Wagyu beef, it's like the standards are so high. It actually, they have ceremonies for the cow while processing the animal. So, I mean, it might sound funny, but like it makes you really feel like what you're eating is of value, which is why Wagyu beef is very expensive, is because of the traceability. You can see when this cow was born, whose was its parents, when was this cow processed, what it was eating, everything. So imagine the next standard is every piece of food we're eating has a similar like value towards it, which I think is very beautiful.
Yeah, right. So just to summarize, then blockchain enables the tracking of ownership records.
Yes.
So it's good for tracking then, and that's how it that's how it provides the solution for things like food fraud and food traceability.
Yes.
Wow. Okay, so, right. Another example of another way of combining technology with agriculture is through indoor vertical farming, which is using growing shelves that are mounted vertically. And it leads to decreased amount of land space that's needed, decreased water and energy. And most vertical farms they're either hydroponic or aeroponic. So can you explain what that means, and can you give us a better idea on what indoor vertical farming is?
So basically, hydroponic system, there are as many different varieties of hydroponic system, but the gist of it is that you have, let's say we're growing peppers, and these peppers, they need a certain amount of, I would say, a recipe for them to grow. So usually it's measured in NPK. NPK is basically nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So usually if you ever got a bag of fertilizer, you would see like, for example, 10, 10, 10. So that means you have 10 mg of each of these elements. But then you have also these macronutrients that's required for the plant. So you basically put these nutrients or fertilizer and water, and the plants will use the roots, and instead of putting it in the ground where the roots have to fight through the ground to reach these nutrients, you're giving it available resources. So therefore, you're decreasing the amount of time usually to grow these things. You're decreasing the amount of diseases because it's not grown in the ground. You're reducing even the amount of space required to grow these plants.
So you submerge the roots of the plant in water that contains the nutrients that it needs to grow and develop. Okay, so that's hydroponics.
Yes.
And it's a subset of something called hydroculture.
Yes.
So what's hydroculture?
So, like hydroculture can mean like, again, there's so many different ways of hydroponics. Hydroponics is like such a broad term. So again, we have the NFT system, which is also hydroponics, but instead of putting it in a pool of water, let's say, it puts it in a small film of water, and it's much shallower. The tube is much shallower. Right. So the roots, you don't need to use a lot of water. You just need like a few droplets of water for it to feed all of these plants instead of,
Okay.
And, there's always this recirculating hydroponics. So instead of like taking out all these nutrients and
reapplying new ones.
Yeah, they just reuse them.
Yeah. What about aeroponics?
So aeroponics, similar concept. You still have the nutrients, but instead of instead of having the plants submerged in water, the roots are sprayed with water in the air. It can create a sort of mist.
Yeah. Okay. Right. And these are both methods of this indoor vertical farming.
Yeah, I mean, there's also aquaponics. And although there are so many companies have done aquaponics, which basically uses fish as a source of nutrients. So instead of applying the nutrients in like a powder form, they have these giant fish tanks in which the fish live in, usually the species called tilapia. And the tilapia is like a freshwater fish, and it can live in even the most worst conditions of I would say, it's a very durable fish. Let's just say that.
Okay. Got it, yeah.
And it lives in that tank, and it produces waste. And when it produces waste, that waste gets fed to the plants in form of nutrients, the NPK again. But it's very difficult to scale. It's very intense because, the science hasn't been exactly calculated. And there's so many companies who try to create commercial, I would say, aquaponic farms. But a lot of them started and they failed because once you have, again, you're working with a live animal to produce something. So there's a lot of factors when it comes to the fish.
Yeah.
Because some people are not going to eat tilapia.
Yeah, but I wonder why. I mean, it seems like, okay, I'm envisioning like a warehouse with vertical shelves all over, stacked on top of each other, say with like water underneath the roots, or like the roots are submerged in water tanks. And it seems like pretty viable to me. I'm not seeing like why this can't be scaled exactly.
Because there's a lot of electrical cost.
Okay.
As a science, it works.
Yeah.
But commercially, it doesn't always work.
Yeah, I see. Okay.
So
there are all these extraneous variables that don't really facilitate the development of this kind of technology.
Sometimes it's just cheaper to grow normally. Like on the ground or whatever, but
so why do people do it anyway? If it's
because again, it addresses there's a lot of benefits.
Yeah.
So example, you need much less land to produce good quality food.
Oh yeah, sure.
And people, you can technically the UAE does not see as hydroponic farming as organic, but some places in the world they do see hydroponic farming as organic because technically the hydroponic systems they have no soil. They're a soilless based system.
Okay.
So anything organic in theory should be in the ground.
Okay. Right.
So anytime you see something hydroponically grown, it is not organic. But I think it's better than organic. In my opinion, because you're reaching to a level of clinically clean places. So even when you go in any hydroponic farm, you have to be basically so clean. You have to be sterile. You have to be in these complete suits, covering everything, hairnets, everything. You go in this chamber.
Yeah. I wanted to ask a question, but it's pretty basic. But what is organic? What does that mean?
Honestly, organic, I just think means it's grown in a natural way, but what is natural is very difficult to define again because NPK is natural,
What's wrong with chemicals?
So
is it like just you're saying like organic is pesticide-free?
It depends.
It's pesticide-free?
Honestly, this term organic is very difficult to define because every country has its own set of organic rules.
Okay.
Every country has its own
different organic criteria.
Yeah. So in the EU, it's different than the US. It's different than in the Middle East. So it's very difficult to define. And again, it's basically a certification. Yeah. And it's very expensive. It's actually very expensive for farmers, which is why
I can imagine.
Yeah, it's very expensive, and you have to keep
buy.
Yeah, and you have to keep. They have inspectors coming in to check, and the gist of it is basically you're using natural aid to grow your farm. So instead of having, let's say, using chemical fertilizers, you're using, like for example, chicken manure or cow manure. Or
I'm not particularly averse to chemical things. I feel like there's maybe we kind of we have this misconception against chemical things as being harmful. Just because something is natural doesn't mean it's, good. And I think I mentioned this previously on another podcast episode where it's like we naturally think of chemical things as being harmful. And I think that's a misconception because, many of the things we use today, like to maintain our hygiene, are predominantly chemical, and nobody seems to, disagree with that. But when it comes to food, we're particularly averse to chemicals being food. But if it's something like pesticides, where I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about this, but it's like pesticides kill pests. So I'm sure they have some kind of, harmful effect on humans to some extent. So maybe like pesticides can be harmful. If that's being interpreted as chemical, then I see what's being said. But if it's fertilizers that are purely chemical, not necessarily pesticides, I'm, I'm not particularly averse to that. What do you think?
Yeah, I do agree with you. I mean, pesticides are bad. I mean, there is a huge lawsuit now for a very well-known pesticide. It kills weeds. It's called Roundup. And it has shown evidence to cause cancer in people.
Wow.
And it's been sprayed everywhere. So, I mean, in that sense, organic does make sense because they will not use any chemical pesticides.
Yeah, I see.
But they do use pesticides.
Yeah.
It can be organic pesticides.
Oh, okay.
It can be natural pesticides. In my own home, I have a rooftop farm. So
Nice.
we just use I would say we make our own special sauce of pesticides. Yeah, you just mix up everyone has their own blend of spices in which they're able to see the benefits to protect your plants from pests.
Going back to earlier where we talked about rapid prototyping, then how do we include that in the technology that facilitates agriculture?
So now, because of all these technologies available to normal people, it gives everyone a chance to be able to create solutions for their own farm around the world, regardless.
It provides more autonomy.
Yeah, it does. So everyone will be able to create solutions for their own problems. So instead of going to large giant corporation to fix your own problems, you just go to the internet and be able to, let's say, go to another fab lab or makerspace, and they have these tools for you to be able to rapid prototype. For example, you have a specific idea, you need to make a specific rack to rake up all your leaves, but it's not available in the market today, so you need to make it. So you can make a prototype, you can use it instantly. So you can have the idea, draw it down, and then build it within maybe a few days, rather than wait for the whole industry to come shift for this specific rake.
Isn't it just easier to go buy it?
I mean, you say that, but some things aren't available in that market or not available in the way they want it to be custom to their own specific needs.
Yeah, okay, I get it.
For example, let's say I'm a person who is has special needs. I can't bend over to pick up certain. To pick up to enable me to become a farmer, I have to be able to use my knees to bend over and pick up the plants.
Right.
If I'm in a field.
Okay.
Whereas if I am in, let's say I created these elevated farms where they reach up to me. See. So that's not always available in the market. You have to be able to make these things.
Yeah, I see what you mean. That's
so,
phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, everyone has their own specific problems depending on their climate, depending on what works for here in the UAE is not going to necessarily work, let's say, in India or in the US. So they have different climates, and rapid prototyping enables the farmer, which are very crafty people who are always going to makeshift something to make it work for them. Available for them.
Yeah.
So again, there's I think a YouTube channel called Open Source Ecology where they even teach people how to make their own tractors.
Nice.
It's all it's very nice because you'll be able. You never even thought about the extent, but we do in the US they do have a tractor problem where their tractor. Yeah, it's actually a big deal.
You are just identifying the most peculiar problems to me that I've just never heard of.
No, I mean because
we covered the banana problem. We're going to the tractor problem.
No, I mean I you know what? It's like these are really big problems because tractors are running if there's no tractor, there's no large-scale industrial farming.
Yeah, right.
So there's no potatoes or corn for you.
Yeah.
If they don't have the right tractor.
Yeah.
So the staple crops, they need tractors.
Yeah.
And if they don't have tractors, then we'll go back to horses. Okay? So the tractors are a really big deal.
Yeah.
And there's a very big conglomerate, in the U.S. that has these tractors.
Yeah.
And these tractors, they need to be fixed by them. They're all computerized these days.
Okay.
So
it's like they have a monopoly of this.
Yeah. So if something breaks, they can only fix it.
Yeah.
So now we have all these farmer hackers that are trying to fix their own tractors by like hacking into the farm, hacking into the tractor itself because it's a computerized system.
Yeah.
Because they can't waste money.
Yeah.
Let's say climate condition right now, it's raining and they have to fix it and they're stuck right now in the middle of the field.
Right. So I think what seems to be one very important advantage of this rapid prototyping technology is that it creates a lot more independence with the user, and a lot less dependence on other third-party companies. Mm-hmm. I can see how that's that's interesting. I feel like the future incorporates a lot of these technologies that really enable the individual to have more autonomy over their own affairs. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So like blockchain is a good example, and then this rapid prototyping is another good example, and it seems like we're becoming more decentralized over time.
Yes, and
it
goes back to the original idea of blockchain, which is a decentralized system.
Exactly.
And actually, in terms of what I was talking about, the tractors, now there's a huge market for tractors that were made in the 70s and 80s because they're not computerized.
Yeah.
So it's a hot commodity for these old tractors in the US because now it's very easy to retrofit these tractors.
Yeah.
But it's very difficult to find some aspect of technology that's not reliant on someone else to fix it.
Yeah, I have a good example with this. So my mom has she keeps the generations of iPads that she's owned. So she has the very first one from a very long time ago. And it's funny because it's quite in demand. So you'll see, like, if you open Dubizzle or places like that, people actually are selling their first generation iPads because they don't come with cameras. Mm-hmm. And it's like you can use these sort of technologies in places where cameras are not allowed.
Yes.
So in jobs that are very very high-risk jobs that are very confidential and so on, that don't allow technology to have the kind, like cameras and the sort of things where you can leak information, like something like the iPad first generation is used. So it's kind of like analogous to the tractor you're talking about, where they're going back to the 80s to get, tractors are not computerized. That's interesting. Like it's like how you're saying going backwards in order to find some solutions for our problems.
Yeah. So I mean, like.
The blockchain avoids that.
Yeah. And you're talking about also the right of repair. Yeah. So if I broke something on my iPhone and if I fix it myself, it avoids the warranty.
Yeah.
If I go to Apple and they say it's unfixable, I have to buy a new phone.
So this is interesting because it feels like a very important aspect of the industrialized society is that you have hyper-specialization or division of labor, which seems to be like what we're going against now.
Yes.
Because what we're doing is then giving the person much more, like versatile skills. So we're giving them the kind of capacity to have ownership over their lives in very different areas, as opposed to being hyper-specialized in one area and relying on somebody else who's hyper-specialized in another area, and so on and so forth. And it seems to be characteristic of like the post-industrial society.
You're talking about also, for example, in the past, in the height of the Industrial Revolution, people were specifically like, for example, if they were making a car, one guy would only put in the bolts in the wheel and the next guy next to him would put the tire on the wheel.
Like the Ford belt.
Yeah, the Ford belt. So now in the modern factory lines, these people are not specifically, they don't specifically do one job. They are much more diverse. They are much more diverse in the way they do their job. Mm. So, like even goes back to how robots aid in manufacturing, and I think that robots aid people in manufacturing side by side rather than against each other. Mm. So, that robot is it's gonna pick up something heavy, but then it doesn't help. It helps the human so that they don't have any back pain or future problems in the workspace. So it enables that human to be able to create other things or facilitate other jobs in the factory line.
Yeah.
So it enables them to do much more than just one specific job. And I don't think people are made for doing one specific job. That's for robots.
Yeah.
you know?
Oh, I completely agree with you. I think, yeah, absolutely.
We shouldn't be doing one task all the time. We're not machines.
Oh, I agree with you entirely, yeah.
We're so diverse as people, you know? It doesn't make sense to... I mean, the factory line at some point made sense for efficiency reasons.
Yeah.
But now we have robots. They are efficient more than humans, 24/7 running.
Yeah.
As long as there's electricity, you have a running factory flow line.
Okay. So, you have a degree in computer science.
Yes, I do.
Surprise, audience, because we have been talking about farming and agriculture for so long. I mean, we did talk about technology and blockchain, but it's really interesting that it's not like you specialize in agriculture and then you kind of it's secondary to you is computer science. It's quite the other way around.
Yes.
So you have a degree in computer science, but your interests are mainly in agriculture and urban farming. How did you develop this?
Again, I was very interested in I personally like to have new hobbies all the time. I like to find my next new thing, as a lot of people do when discovering themselves in their late teen years. So
farming is probably low on that list.
I took up gardening at first.
Like identity attachments. You know what I mean?
I do understand. Yeah, it's very funny.
It's like kudos to you for developing such a niche interest.
Which is funny because I thought I was very rare, but once you get to go into the industry, you see you're like one in a million or something. So basically, I started to take up gardening, and I was so passionate and interested about it. And I have no background in farming. My family, first or second and third generation, are not farmers at all. So contrary to a lot of people believe, they think that a lot of Emirati people come from farming families, whereas my family, we were not farmers. So I had to learn a lot from YouTube. Again, it comes back to, we were talking about how the internet can really change, way of learning. So I developed my passion for gardening. And then eventually I'm like, why am I just growing flowers? I want to grow food. I'm like, I want to grow, I see people on YouTube growing these amazing, heirloom tomatoes, or these green, tomatoes, or you have these purple carrots. And I'm like, why don't we even have any of this? I'm like, is this even real? So I'm like, you know what? Instead of just growing flowers, I'm going to grow food now. I'm not going to grow for beauty. I'm going to grow for consumption because I couldn't get these things here. And then eventually trying a lot of things, a lot of my plants died. A lot of them burned, especially in the summer here in Dubai. And I personally I don't live in a very big plot of land in my home. So it was all urban farming. I had to plant in pots. I had to develop my own systems to plant. I tried vertical farming in my own home. Personally, it did not work for me. Again, not every system is going to work for your own home. And we go back how the customization of systems and rapid prototyping, they come hand in hand depending on your home situation or your situation wherever you are in the world. And I developed an interest in gardening in that sense because I wanted to try new things. And then I saw this is actually a real big problem in the world. Not everyone can do the same things as I'm doing. So I connected it to a bigger picture. I got a light bulb moment. It's my problems are not just my problems. They are universal problems in the agriculture industry. And then I had an idea where, everyone has a refrigerator at home. So why can't we grow in our own home and make it look like a refrigerator? And me personally, as a person who's in technology, I know something that looks foreign is not going to be adopted by normal people. So I wanted to make something so common as a refrigerator for you to be able to grow your plants in. And this was, you're talking about late 2015, early 2016. And now LG just created their refrigerator, which you'll be able to grow food in. So, maybe they had it under wraps, but in Dubai, at least, a lot of people associate me with that project.
Yeah.
I won a lot of awards for it, almost 9 awards for that.
What do you call it?
The Fresh Fridge.
The Fresh Fridge.
Yeah.
Nice.
Very plainly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And basically, it has a focus of microherbs, so you can grow microherbs, which basically are herbs. And vegetables you can grow within 10 to 15 days.
Wow.
And people, they always want something instant. So that's better than waiting like 100 days for, like a pepper or tomato.
Yeah, I see.
And it's seasonless, so you can grow anywhere, anytime.
Yeah. Especially useful here.
Yeah, especially here because we have really harsh summers. And
we do.
me not understanding the seasons at that time because, again, I didn't have any contacts with the local farming industry. And mainly the local farmers here, they're men and they're much older, in their late 40s.
Yeah.
So late 40s and beyond. And it's very difficult to reach them, and they're very secretive with their own ways. They don't want to tell you their secret on how they can grow certain things. So, and I don't believe in secrets. I believe in like
open source knowledge.
Like I learned from the internet, and you should be able to share your.
You need a WikiHow page.
Yeah, exactly. I need you to help me. We're not against each other. I'm not gonna steal your clients. This is for me. This is my food.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then you have them growing in very traditional ways still. And I try to, help them, from my knowledge, convert these, I would say, traditional farms into maybe non-traditional farms where instead of growing in the ground, they will grow in like a potted system.
Yeah.
Again. And I have a particular interest for using, not using electricity. Because in these farms, sometimes they don't have any electricity or have limited access to electricity and water. Especially here in the UAE, some farms, I call them, quotation marks, pleasure farms, because they don't need to grow in there, but they are forcing themselves to grow for their own pleasure, and it's fun to grow for them so they can feed their own family. But it's not a necessity, It's just for fun. It's a hobby in the end of the day. And for me, it came in as a hobby. So I had that interest as well.
Well, AlMaha, this has been a very wonderful conversation.
Thank you
learned
so
a
much.
lot.
I learned from you.
I mean, what an interesting combination of things, agriculture and technology. So thank you for being on the show. It was very nice learning from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Sarah.
That was AlMaha AlMuhairi. To listen to more episodes, you can find Good Question on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for what you'd like to see from us next, you can reach us at GoodQuestionUAE on Instagram and Twitter, or email us at info@goodquestion.ae. Good Question is a production of the Youth Science Council and the Office of Advanced Sciences in the United Arab Emirates. Produced and directed by Hind Al-Ali and Hayat Al-Hassan. Sarah Al-Ali is our editor. Our social media and communications are managed by Mohammed Al-Mansouri and Fatma Luta. And I'm Sarah Shirbaji.